Okay, welcome back to the Default Global Podcast. Today we've got an exciting guest, Khalil Zlaoui, co-founder and CEO of CaseBlink. Khalil's journey is fascinating. Before founding CaseBlink, he worked at Google, leading AI projects for their healthcare team. And now he's using that expertise to completely change the immigration legal industry. CaseBlink is an AI-powered platform that automates the most writing-intensive visa applications. What used to take law firms months can now be done in a fraction of the time. And now, in just over a year, Khalil has raised 1.1 million in pre-seed funding, and CaseBlink is already making waves in the legal tech space. Khalil, it's great to have you here. Did I miss anything important in that introduction?
Short introduction, but to the point. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
I'm happy to be here.
Okay, awesome. So, Khalil, you've shared before that the inspiration for CaseBlink came from your personal experience while working at Google, right? So you were going through the immigration process yourself, right? Applying for this national interest, what is called waiver, right? Can you walk us through that moment? What was it about? Uh, what was it about the process that made you think there is got to be like a better way, and how did that lead to starting CaseBlink?
So it didn't necessarily start when I was at Google because I've been in the US. I had been in the US at the time for about 7 years. And I have been going through the immigration process that entire time. And I think I like to say that I think I applied to six or five or six different types of visas while I was in the US. You know, from getting a student visa to getting work authorization to then moving to the H-1B visa and then applying to these more complex visas like the EB2 national interest waiver and the O1A. I really ended up understanding sort of like this industry without really working in it. And eventually, when I ended up applying to a national interest waiver and I worked with a lawyer and I worked very closely with a lawyer because before that I was sort of like the employee and I had a lawyer, but I wasn't really working very closely with them. So when I ended up working very closely with a lawyer and realize how much effort goes into preparing these cases, how much energy is put into reading a client's documents, extracting the right information, filling forms, drafting legal brief, drafting recommendation letters. When I realized that all of that was a huge pain point, and also, like you said, with my experience in machine learning and data science, it kind of clicked. You know, I knew that there was a way to make this process faster, more automated, and exactly at the right time because I was basically playing around with I think GPT 3.5 at the time and sort of like playing around with prompting and trying to generate some text. Of course, it wasn't it hallucinated here and there. It was very early on, but I just saw the opportunity, and that's how I decided to try to build something and solve for this problem.
hmm And immigration law might seem like a very niche industry to some, but from what I understand, it is a huge market, right? Can you break down the numbers for us? Like, how big is this immigration law sector?
Yeah, so it really depends what we're talking about. So there's employment-based immigration, there's family-based immigration. It I think there's about 10 million filings each year, both in employment-based and family-based, and that could be an adjustment of status, naturalization, or employment-based visa. So it's pretty big. In terms of where we started with these very complex writing intensive visas where nothing had been done before. So nothing had been done to automate these visas particularly. And so, right then, when there's an opportunity like this, that you kind of have to jump into it because there was nothing previously that could enable building something like this. The tools weren't there. The artificial intelligence models were not advanced to the point that you could sort of like automate these very complex tasks. But last year, and I would say maybe in the last four years or so, these models got so much better that there was this opportunity to sort of like start tackling this niche um, uh, cases within immigration. But then there's also so much to be done in family-based adjustments as well, because immigration is not just writing intensive; it's also forms intensive. And there's also ways to automate how those forms are being filled, so that a lot of creativity can go into there, and also saving time for paralegals or lawyers who do that.
Hmm. And speaking about lawyers, I know that law firms charge quite a bit for handling these immigration cases, right? Especially the complex ones that you mentioned. So I'm just curious, what does a typical firm charge for one of these cases? And next question, how does CaseBlink's automation impact those fees?
Yeah. There's so first of all, let's start from the basics. Immigration is most of the time 90%, 80 to 90% of the time flat fee. So it's not billed by the hour. So lawyers charge per case. So if I go and see a lawyer and say, "Hey, I want to apply to an O1A or a national interest waiver," they usually give you a quote like, "This is what the legal fee will cost." So maybe $8,000 or $7,000. There is heterogeneity amongst law firms, and so it can go anywhere from maybe $4,000 to up to $20,000, $30,000. So it really depends how niche you are, who your clients are, what sort of services you provide, right? So if it's really hand holding the client and sort of like a white glove service, then you can go really high in terms of pricing. But I would say the average is probably around 7,000, maybe $8,000 for these cases. And it also depends on the nature of the firm, right? So some of them are like process a lot of these visas, and so their fees are kind of a little smaller or lower, and some of them are maybe the solos would charge a little bit higher. It really depends. But there, I guess the takeaway is there's heterogeneity and there's fluctuation in these fees. In terms of how CaseBlink works,
Yeah.
in changing I guess the field structure a little bit, is that at least in the short term, we give them a tool to save time in terms of putting together these cases. So if it takes a lawyer 60 hours of work on a case, our goal is to make it so that they only spend 5 hours. And so we help them by cutting the cost of that, is 70%, let's say, or 80% spent putting together the case. And so therefore, naturally, whatever they charge the client, they get to decide, okay, I didn't spend, 60, 70 hours. I just spent kind of 5 hours. And so they decide on the fee structure based on that. I would like to think that one of the impact of artificial intelligence in this specific use case is that it's going to increase access to justice, right? So someone who cannot afford to pay $10,000 or $15,000, maybe they will find lawyers that will charge $3,000 because they're not going to spend 50 or 60 hours on a case. Or maybe you have clients who don't really want to do anything and they just want the lawyer to do everything and spend a lot of extra time doing research, et cetera, for their client. And maybe then you'll have a little like the cost of the visa will be a little higher. So it really depends how you work, how the lawyer works with the client, I would say, and how they want to run their business.
Yeah. Or maybe it will increase profit for some of them.
100%. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So 1.1 million in pre-seed funding, right? That's no small feat, especially in such a like a specialized field, right? Can you can you take us behind the scenes of that fundraising journey? How many meetings did you
Yeah.
have, and what was the process like? Yeah, tell us.
Yes. Maybe I just want to start by saying that it's hard for me to give advice because it's kind of my own experience, so it wouldn't apply to a lot of other founders, especially based on what stage they are, um, and also where they're building, what industry, what their team looks like, what they're trying to solve for, etc. But just speaking to the fundraising process itself, we were lucky enough to have participated in a startup accelerator program, and that really changed the deal for us. So we were a part of ERA, Entrepreneur Roundtable Accelerator in New York City, and being in a program like that really exposes you to a lot of investors. And the culmination of that program is Demo Day. So you're essentially pitching your startup in front of 1,000+ investors. And it really makes things easier for you because it'll be these investors trying to talk to you as opposed to you sort of like doing cold outreach and trying to reach out to investors. So I would say that's the first part that really helped. The second part that really helped for us is that we are building in a market that's really hot and an industry that's completely changing. And there's no doubt in that. There's no doubt that the legal field is going to change with AI, right? And our innovation was sort of like early on, so sort of like among the first to market. There was AI for this, AI for that, but AI for legal really spoke to at least some investors, and specifically in immigration, because sometimes what you would hear from investors is that, well, they don't really, they charge they bill by the hour, so why would they use your platform? Because in any case, they would like make less money. And immigration is different because it's flat fee, so it's not about making less money. It's either about taking more cases or making more margins, and that makes it a little different. So yeah, a combination of attending the program, a combination of having investors come in and talk to us as opposed to us chasing investors, building the right product at the right time, building in the hot market. AI, everyone is excited about it.
Yeah. And so pitching legal tech, especially AI-driven legal tech, must have been, this interesting challenge. But speaking about the pitch, right, itself, what did your pitch deck focus on? Can you tell us?
Yeah.
Was it more about the size of the immigration market, like you said, that it's like a hot market, or the technology behind CaseBlink, or it's kind of mix of something?
I think for us, at least what we had is basically touching on various aspects. So the market size, of course, is an important dimension to the pitch. Because ultimately you're speaking with investors who don't necessarily know your market. No one necessarily knows about the immigration market in the US. No one knows about the size, the number of applicants, the fee structure. So there, of course, there are slides that sort of like lay the foundations for what is this market and where is the opportunity, right? Why is this a good, interesting problem to solve from a technological point of view, and also from sort of like appetite, right? Why would lawyers want to use this? So there's sort of like all that narrative that explains how things are being done now, how things are going to change with technology, and where we sit and how we think we can approach this problem, and how we broke it down, and how what is the product that we're building to address it.
Got it. So you mentioned this a couple of times, but still, raising money is all about like a timing, right? So you mentioned that it was the right time, but did you face any pivots along the way, whether in terms of the product itself or how you pitched the market opportunity to investors? Maybe you can tell us a few words about that.
We did change the narrative a little bit because going into the fundraising process, we were sort of not sure about whether or not we would be a direct to consumer company or B2B. Direct to consumer, you can directly sell to, you can essentially be a law firm, right? A technical law firm. And we were kind of trying to do both at the same time. Oh, we'll do the consumer, but we'll also do B2B. And that didn't work at all. So we ended up just focusing on, and I know why, right? You can't do but you can't build, it's two different companies. You can't build two companies at the same time. So I think more generally, when you pitch something, you need to have sort of like your go-to-market approach. Like, how are you going to disrupt a very niche or piece of this market first and win it, and then how are you going to expand, right? And so focusing on the first part is really important. What is the size of this micro market that you're addressing, and how are you going to solve for it, and how are you going to win it? And that's where kind of like you explain, this is the market I'm addressing, and this is the size, and this is my product, and this is sort of like the problem and how we're solving for it. But then, of course, there's a longer term vision, right? So articulating that is also important, because the first market that you address, or at least from what I've seen, is always small, right? It's always small, but with the capability of expanding to at least other workflows or other areas of law, or in our case, right? So that is also something that you kind of figure out talking to more investors and getting feedback, and sort of like collect. That's ultimately what you end up doing, right? You take a lot of calls, and then you get similar questions, you see the patterns, and then you kind of change your pitch a little bit to adapt.
I know that your team is quite international, based in several countries outside of the US, as far as understood. So, given that CaseBlink is focused on the US immigration system,
Mhm.
did investors raise any concerns about having such a distributed team as you have?
Um, we we actually had investors raise concerns about being remote in the US as well. So some investors prefer that all the founders be located in the same place as
Hmm.
well. So there was a little bit of that, but it really depends on the investor preferences. And we have, yeah, sure, like maybe 5-10% didn't like the idea, but otherwise it wasn't such a big deal.
Okay. But how did you address those concerns?
Um, I mean, we didn't have it with the 90%, so it
Oh,
wasn't
okay.
so much of an issue.
Wasn't a big problem.
Um, yeah, yeah, but for the 5 to 10%, I mean, our team is remote, and we can't change that.
Yeah. But do you see this as a like a benefit for your business when you have like such a distributed team?
I think so. Yeah, I think so, because so we have some engineers here in the US. We have some engineers overseas, and there's also overlapping windows where we notice a problem at night, and then some of the engineers work on it in the morning. So I think there are a lot of benefits of having a distributed
Mhm.
team. Um, I, I mean, the world is global, as you know.
Yeah.
So I guess one thing that this doesn't really. Um, this isn't really, I guess, specific to investors, but in general, just making sure that um, y- you you have windows of time where you connect with a team. Something that I like personally is to have cameras on, because
Hmm.
if we don't see each other every day, then we don't really building that connection. Some people may disagree with me, but that's I think that,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know if everyone likes cameras on, but I think for me, at least, when I talk to people remotely, I like to see them. And
Yeah.
we also meet in person, right? So we try to do maybe every 4 months or so. We try to do an in person.
Hmm.
So of course, yeah, remote is great, but I think in person time also kind of helps you build those relationships.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So probably my last question: what are the maybe three most important things you would tell a founder preparing for to raise money in 2024?
Okay. Again, I want people to take this with a grain of salt, because it's my experience
Sure.
within my industry, with the technology that we're building in AI. So it's very
Yeah, yeah. But let's focus on that, particularly for those trying to raise funds in niche
yeah,
sectors like legal tech. You know.
yeah. Well, the first one, which I always repeat, is you should be protective of your time. You're building a company, and the same way that investors vet you, I think you also have to vet them, unfortunately, because a lot of people are just interested in sort of like understanding your market without necessarily the willingness or interest in investing in that market. So I would say understanding, well, that's the first thing, right? So being protective of your time, making sure you vet the investors. And the second thing, also kind of in that same area, I would say, is um, making sure that you're talking to the investor in the right stage, right? So if you're talking to investors who invest in Series A and you're trying to raise a pre-seed, sure, you're building relationships for the future, but is it really what you're focusing on right now? You kind of need money now if you're raising right now, and your time is protected because you also are building a company. So prioritizing your immediate needs, which is I need to fundraise and I need to fundraise now. So really needing to vet your investors and making sure they invest in this in the stage where you are, at check sizes that make sense, and also in the industry where you are, right? So I would usually ask, hey, have you invested in legal tech before, or are you interested in legal tech, and why or why not? Also, what's your minimum check size or target ownership? So those are things that I think really help in terms of alignment. And the third thing I would say is people will tell you to have a process, which it is true. You should have a process. You should record who you're record in terms of having a spreadsheet or a way to follow, right? Who you're talking to, when you talk to them, when's the right time to do a follow up. So make sure you follow a process and are very organized about it, because you will end up talking to hundreds of people, and the last thing you want to do is forget or just send them duplicate emails or not following up. So having a process helps. It doesn't mean that it will close the deal.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This has been like an amazing conversation. And thanks again for sharing your journey with us today.
Thank you, but thank you for having me. I appreciate it.